So I'm trialling this Abranet sandpaper. I bought a few sheets of a few different grits to see how it goes. I haven't really committed to a 6-inch sandpaper. I've got some 5-inch ones. I use Seafast. Parent company is Bosch. I quite like that sandpaper. I find for epoxy it's really, really quick and leaves a good finish. I'm finding a few things with this Abranet. First off, it at the same grits leaves a better finish than the Sea stuff. It seems to cut faster. It is potentially better dust collection, but on the Bosch sander that's only got 6 holes on the 6-inch disc instead of 8 or 16 or whatever, it doesn't seem to work great. Now part of that is the Bosch, well, a lot of that's the Bosch sander's fault. The dust port doesn't always get a great seal, so I did some adjustment and I did get better. I think I'm getting better dust collection on the Sea paper, which is the 5-inch discs. And that Bosch sander lets you do both sizes. So I'm going to call it about even. The Mirka sandpaper, the Abranet, is more expensive, but does it last longer? I'm not sure at this stage, I'm still evaluating that. I've used it on the lathe before and I found that the Abranet just lasted forever. You also need to use these interface pads. This goes between the Velcro and the sandpaper, and this protects your pad, so that lasts for longer. So these are consumables. They're only about $5, I think. It is much quicker because you're changing grits because you don't have to line up holes because the whole thing is mesh. The other thing I've noticed is that it keeps both the workpiece and the sander much, much cooler, which is going to be good for the life of the Velcro, good for the life of the sander, good for the finish quality. Particularly if you're doing like a mix composite material, so it might have some epoxy in it. This is my old grinder on the flip top workbench thing that I made. It has problems with the positioning to get the balance right, so I'm going to be making a new sharpening station. I'll get into that in a vlog video, which I'll record and publish about the same time as this vlog. Bought a new grinder. This is the Vicmark DS200S. It comes with 2 white aluminium oxide wheels. I've also bought a CBN wheel. It's a 180 grit CBN wheel. It's a Vicmark. So it's got grit on the side of the wheel on that side, 40 millimeters of it. This is a bloody heavy grinder at about 30 something kilos plus wheels. So for now it's living here until I can build that extra bench. It's big, it's 8-inch grinder, but it's just big. 280 watt grinder, 1500. It's a 2 horsepower grinder. This is complete overkill. It is pretty quiet though when it's up and going. Let's see if we can get it going. So it's a little noisy on startup, but once it gets up to speed, it's quite good. But it is really well balanced. It takes probably 3 minutes or so to actually slow down, or actually stop I should say. So I'm going to leave that go. It's been about a year since a little more than a year since I built this. And this has been the miter saw station. This has been great in that I've got somewhere for the miter saw, I've got so much shop storage. One thing that's been terrible is I have a lot of regrets about it. I didn't do the construction great. One thing I really regret is the bases. So I went with basically square boxes, rectangular boxes that sit on top of a plinth, whereas the other style I've seen has a toe kick built into the sides. I didn't do a good enough job of the plinths that they don't correctly compensate for how uneven this floor is. Normally a garage floor will slope towards the exit. This one slopes towards, on both slabs, the middle, which doesn't make any sense. There's no drain. And that in turn has caused issues with the fence here. So I've had to pull this cabinet out here because it was hitting the fence on different angles, and I've learned a lot about, well, most things woodworking in that year's time, as well as how I want to have my storage. I love those drawers, but some of the stuff in those drawers is going to be coming out to sharpening station, to potentially a base for the table saw. So I'm contemplating rebuilding this. I do it all out of plywood, pine plywood, because it's cheap and cheerful, relatively cheap. Perhaps a more correct term would be relatively inexpensive. The melamine is cheaper, but 18mm pine is much easier to build structures with. While it is a little bit heavier, it just bonds better. I'd also move these out from the wall by 200mm. I wouldn't make them any deeper, but by moving it 200mm out, I can also compensate for the waviness in the wall, as well as the garage door. When that's open, I can have long pieces hanging out of there. And I've actually run into that a couple of times. So that's something I'm thinking about. I'm trying to get a particular company to sponsor that video by throwing the wheels on the grinder have just stopped then. It took a while. I'm trying to get a particular company on board to sponsor it in the way of a couple of products so that I can build this right. I do it similar to Jay Bates's design, I think. Layout would be very different. The actual construction of the cabinets would be different too. I like the idea of smaller storage on top. And by extending this out 200mm, so it'd be 800 total, I have a little bit more area to do that in. I'd probably put these small parts storage things here and then some other storage, I don't know what at the moment, over there. I think a lot of my tools I'd like the circular saw, the router, the sander, I'd like on shallowish trays, so drawers basically, so I can pull those out, somewhat protected from dust. I can have some of their accessories in with them. I'd redo the fence using probably a track system rather than a DIY approach. So that could be over several episodes. Likely building the cabinets would be one, building the miter saw fence and various parts around that another, installing the drawers, maybe even looking at the different zones of storage. If you've got any ideas for how you would store things if you were starting all over again, and by things I mean everything in a workshop really. I've got small parts, I've got tools, I've got marking tools, I've got jig components, lots of bits and pieces. The only thing that I won't be having up here is the chemicals. That'll be going down closer to the sink. I think the idea of a lot of trays so that these 600mm deep cabinets aren't as wasted is a good one. I just need to figure out what goes in those trays. So is it as simple as just plonking the tool on it, or having some sort of dividers, or would they be really narrow? So maybe they'll only be 300mm wide so that I can get 6 tools in instead of 3. So those sort of things I need to still think about. So that's a long way down the track. Thanks for watching.